Before we get started, a quick reminder that the BBC is a transphobic organization platforming people who are literally calling for the genocide of trans women. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you will find links in a pinned comment below with my video on the topic, as well as a more recent one from the YouTuber Sean. And with that out of the way, on with the show. So, kitchen sink. We're just kitchen sinking it at this point. Doctor Who Flux continues, episode 3, Once Upon a Time. It's actually kind of bizarre to me that there has not been a Doctor Who episode prior to this that was called Once Upon a Time. We've had Twice Upon a Time, but not once. Very strange. Anyways, this is the third episode, and I'm noticing a particularly distinct pattern, at least so far. Well, the next episode will confirm whether or not this holds, but based off the next time little thing that we got, I'm feeling kind of confident about it, at least going this far into it, which is that odd-numbered episodes have been ones that deal with the overarching stuff more than anything else, and the even-number ones are dealing with, not entirely, but something closer to a self-contained story. We saw that in War of the Sontarans, and that looks like what we're going to be dealing with the Weeping Angels next time. And that's fine, all things considered. But it does put me in a position where the odd-numbered ones I'm just not liking nearly as much. So, I like this better than the first episode. I'll say that up front. It does a couple of things that help me gel with it a little bit better. For one, it actually threw me off right at the beginning, introducing Belle, and like Belle's story, and like this young woman who's dodging Daleks, and like she's there, and I'm like, for God's sake, you're throwing in another element that I don't know why it's here. But by the end of the same episode, I understood why she was here, because she connects to Vinder's story. I still don't know if Vinder really needs to be here, which, like, okay, my general opinion on both Vinder and Dan at this point is that I'm waiting to see why they're here. And I mean, like, in terms of the overall dynamics. From a strictly logistical point of view, they're giving us routes to additional things, I guess, and allowing for more information to come in. But, you know, as someone who very vocally was looking forward to the idea of just the Doctor and Yaz so that I could see that relationship deepen, instead throwing in more characters, it feels like, in terms of the inter-character dynamics, it feels like an excuse to not have to deepen the Doctor and Yaz's relationship. Because there isn't time, because we got more people. But anyways, tangented a little bit there. My point being, by the time this episode was done, I understood why this new element that had been introduced was here. And that's good, considering that there's some stuff that was introduced back in the first episode that I still don't know why that's going on. So, at the very least, new stuff brought in has been justified within the episode it was brought in. Thank you. I appreciate that. The other thing that this did, which I liked but then frustrated me sort of like in a sideways fashion, I like that the fugitive Doctor has shown up here. Now, this largely falls within what was kind of the accepted speculation around a lot of this, which is that with the Ravagers, I guess that's what they are collectively, Swarm and Azure, with the Ravagers, you know, having said that they've faced the Doctor before, but she doesn't remember them, the obvious option is that the Doctor faced them while she was the fugitive Doctor, because we know she doesn't remember that life. We still don't know why, or why that version of the Doctor was, you know, in cahoots with the Division, or why that version of the Doctor was called the Doctor, or had a TARDIS that looked like a phone box. But it did. I don't know how much hope I'm going to hold out that all that gets dealt with. But in any case, I got excited seeing her back and seeing her in. Because first of all, Jo Martin is still damn good in this part. And even in brief glimpses that we get her, god damn it, does she command the screen. She's really, really good. And it's frustrating, even though I like seeing her and I liked actually seeing things connect back to this, which, you did all this stuff dropping bombs about this last series, and no, we're halfway through. You're finally starting to bring it back in. But at the same time, it takes up a very small percentage of the runtime of this thing. It feels like one of many threads not given significantly more weight. The Doctor seems to care more about it, but the narrative as a whole doesn't feel like it's giving her presence that much more weight. And honestly, even the Doctor's level of caring about it, I'm still having a hard time parsing. Because while I understand the Doctor or anybody wanting to know what about their own life has been kept from them, when she says things like, I need to find out who I was, who I am, like, you know who you are. The way that they get her worked up and invested in this, I don't buy. So that doesn't help. I actually feel really, really bad for Jodie Whittaker in this episode because she is given so much exposition, like almost nothing but exposition in terms of her lines, and exposition and technobabble, and like frequently unnecessary because like she pulls Dan and Yaz into the time storm thing, and they like get thrown out of it. Oh, and also Vinder. They get thrown out of it, but then she's like back in it and talking to the Maury. That's how they said it, I think. Chibnall, your names for these aliens suck, man. But she's talking to the Maury, and then like there's this moment where she's like, I'm getting pulled back out again, thrown back into my own timeline. I'm like, yeah, we know. We've seen it happen like 3 times. Just do it at this point. Why? And it was so clearly an overdub line too, because like the image is her from the back. And it was so clunky, and it felt insulting that they felt the need to inject that. Like, conceptually, I like some of the things going on in this episode because some of the episodes I have liked better during this era have been the more mind-bendy, slightly more out there ideas, like It Takes You Away and Can You Hear Me? And on paper, this could have been more in line with those in terms of the characters jumping along their own paths, but it's not quite right. It's slightly different. We learn more about them, but it is over-explained so much almost immediately that any of that air of discovery or that sense of unease from not being entirely sure what's going on is gone almost as soon as it starts happening, because it gets over-explained not only too soon, but then repeatedly again after that. I think I could have gotten a lot more enjoyment out of this with about 30 to 40% of the exposition trimmed or cut. Because I think that the jumping between timelines and the Doctor phasing in and out of different people's realities and pasts and histories, that in and of itself could have been an interesting thing to try and unravel and try and follow and try and, be with the characters as they try and wrap their heads around what's going on. But again, it got over-explained too early and then too often. And like, can I just take a hot second and say how really bizarrely weird it is for me that Yaz's thing with her sister is like a complete validation of the fake gamer girl idea, concept. That's... I'm just going to say it. That's kind of gross. The whole idea of the fake gamer girl was a gatekeeping technique to keep women out of gaming spaces. The presumption that, you're not a real gamer, you're pretending to like games so that guys will think you're cool, which is not really a thing that happens and just becomes an excuse to bar women from gaming spaces, or did. It's not even really an in-fashion thing to say and hasn't been for years, and yet this seems to outright validate it. I'm sorry, that's kind of screwed up. I don't want to dwell on it too much because it's such a small part of the episode, but like anybody else, just me, that felt screwed up. But like, again, without the exposition there, the pace at which things were revealed felt decent, especially within the Doctor's story. Like, the point at which she looks in the, like, because you don't know initially, is this just a completely fabricated reality for her? You know, because, you know, she's there obviously with people who she would never be in a combat situation like this with, like Dan and Yaz, and then seeing the fugitive Doctor in the mirror and hearing the reference to Dan being a dog and realizing, oh no, it's like projecting these people over what the actual memory is of, and it's Cavanista? I think I finally got the name right. So, like, that was kind of cool to follow, and if the overall thing had been more in line with that, sort of letting us follow and learn with the characters as opposed to having the Doctor dump so much of the information on both the characters and us. Like, I think the Doctor being injected into the other people's stories probably shouldn't have been there. I think her jumping in to explain big chunks of what's going on, I think it would have been better to chuck that, have a more dreamlike, off-putting atmosphere to the entire thing, where it doesn't feel like she's more or less in control of this the whole way through. Because it does feel like that. Like, it says, you know, she's juggling timelines, and, like, people are saying, you know, this is too much for you, whatever, but, like, as a practical matter, that's not what we see. She's jumping and she's not in total control, but she seems to more or less have a handle on things. She understands what's going on for the most part. I mean, she still doesn't know her full history, but for the purposes of this story, she seems to be pretty in control of it. So later on, when the Mori are like, you know, this is too much for you, this will tear you apart, I'm like, will it? Because I have not gotten a proper sense of strain of this on her. Again, it's better than the first episode because I understand more of what it's doing, or at least I see how more of what it's doing could have worked better, for me at least. If you really dig this, that's great. Like, I really got to emphasize that. If you enjoyed the first episode, if you like this one, I'm envious because I would like to. But right now, the second episode is easily the strongest one for me, with this one coming in second by default because the first episode just felt like it did not work at all for me. And also, it's getting weird to me that this is called Doctor Who Flux when the Flux itself feels like an afterthought at this point. Like, it was a thing that was coming and it was destructive, but the Earth was shielded from it. But now we're dealing with, like, some post-apocalyptic stuff going on. We're, like, because in Belle's story, she's, like, in after the Flux and all that. So, like, okay, so it came through and it messed stuff up, but obviously the universe didn't end. Things are still around. People are still around. Daleks and Cybermen are still around. So, and it also seems to have, like, the idea of stopping the Flux at all doesn't even come up. Now it's the idea that, like, time is the problem, which is another thing that, like, on paper, I kind of like because it's a kind of out there, more sort of sci-fi of the mind, trippy concept. The idea of time running wild, and that if time is not controlled and restrained, it just affects things in such a way that life as we know it doesn't function. It reminds me a little bit of the everything is happening at once from the husband's, was it the husband? No, the wedding of River Song. But much like that, it's an interesting idea that is severely underexplored. It's something that they just kind of say, and they've got the time particles or whatever, the little blue firefly looking things, which that's a terrible effect. And like the first time we saw it outside, like seeing it go in front of the trees and stuff, I looked at that and went, that looks like something from the friggin' 80s version of Doctor Who. That's a bad looking effect. And I think it's badly designed because the show's gotten very good with effects. So I think the design of it is just not working for me at all. It just looks So, but like those are going on. It's like, oh, it's time and time is dangerous. Like, well, then like truly grapple with the idea of time unraveling or running wild or whatever it is you want to do. But like, they just kind of call it time is going badly, but it's just this nebulous stuff, like these blue particles going around. There's hints and there's glimpses and there's ideas here that I could find interesting or find potential in, but right now they're just not being used all that interestingly. I will note about the cliffhanger. I didn't talk about the cliffhanger last time. I don't like them particularly. I don't like cliffhangers very much in general. That's not even a Doctor Who thing. But I will say, after it was pointed out to me, I did appreciate, like, these are very reminiscent of classic era Doctor Who style cliffhangers, which is that, you know, within the last 30 seconds of an episode, either things escalate quickly to the point that, oh God, it's all going to go wrong, or something happens very suddenly that now we have to deal with. So last time it was, you know, the threat of Oblivion from Swarm, and this time it's Weeping Angel just showing up and being a threat. But you know what? As cheap as that cliffhanger is, because that's like it just shows up out of nowhere. I like it was vaguely connected to Yaz's story, but no story was strong enough on its own to really feel like it justified continuing off from that. But now it's here and it's in danger. Cliffhanger. Like, as cheap as that is, the idea of a weeping angel in the TARDIS, kind of a neat idea. And I'll be curious to see what the next one is, because the next one, at least on the preview, it is reminding me more of War of the Sontarans, in the sense of it looks like it has a more self-contained story to tell, which that's what worked better for me so far in this series. Vinder's backstory it was predictable, but it's decently done. He acts it well enough. But I guess that's the only other thing there is, because we didn't really learn all that much substantively new or important about Yaz or about Dan. We learned a bit about Vinder, but that's kind of it. I feel like this is going to sound weird. I feel like this should have been looser. Like this feels like it has been over-tightened. Too many lines of exposition to be sure no one is left behind, when I think a certain feeling of unease and uncertainty would have benefited it. Now, that might sound weird to me, given that I was complaining about how I didn't understand what was going on in the first episode, except the first episode wasn't going for a sense of unease. It was just piling crap on top of me. I think you can go into something and if you balance it right and have just the right amount of confusion to just create a sense where the audience doesn't feel secure in what's going on. Not in everything, like, this is all too much, I don't get what's going on, but going on, like, I feel like I kind of get what's going on, but something's a little off. I feel like that's the balance that this setup and these ideas could have struck, but didn't. Still better than the first episode. We'll see what the next one's like. Fingers crossed. Doctor Who Flux. Once Upon a Time. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Got a Patreon. That's how I pay my bills. Keep this whole operation up and running. Any amount you're able to support me there is greatly appreciated. But even if you can't, that's all right. The likes, shares, subscribes help me out as well. But even if you're not up for that, that's okay too. Because at the end of the day, you are the council. I'm just running the meetings. So until next time, this council is adjourned. Hey, hey, if you're sticking around through the credits, might as well hear some names read out. My Patreon helps support this, and in particular, I want to thank Raven McBain, Bookworm, MJ, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Kaylin Schwartz, Edalyn, Robin Moore, Ross Schultz, Shayla Gourlay. Want to hear me mispronounce your name? Check out the rewards on the Patreon.